It seems that the previous write-up in our Serial Killer World Roundup was a little underwhelming for some of our readers. With that in mind, today we will discuss a case that is unusual, to say the least. Before we begin, I want to emphasize once again two things. 1. We will be dealing with some extreme subject matter. It of course goes with the territory. If you don't wish to read about extreme behavior, do not read any further. You have been warned. 2. The purpose of this is simply to present the facts. It is not intended to glorify the killers, nor take some perverted delight in detailing aberrant behavior. Because of the nature of this particular case, it will deal with some touchy topics. Let me be clear. I welcome calm, reasoned discussion. If you wish to rant, abuse, give a sermon, tell others what we should be thinking, etc., you will be blocked. Period. Now let's begin. Again, I will be dealing with another German case, which has been very briefly mentioned here in passing before, but since it was a long time ago and contained very few details, I decided to revisit the case. Note: I will not be posting any photographs of Schmidt, as I have no desire to be accused of using them to subject him to ridicule. The case is that of Wolfgang, now Beate Schmidt. And what makes the case an unusual one is the killer's move to change his gender. Schmidt is commonly referred to as the Pink Giant, due to his 6'2" height and habit of leaving pink lingerie on the victims, or the Beast of Beelitz. The Pink Giant, or Beast of Beelitz, who had been cross-dressing in secret since childhood, was given the right to change his name to Beate by a court in 2001. An Army veteran, ex-police officer and a crane operator by trade, the 6'2" Schmidt was a heavy-drinking, sticky-fingered, xenophobic and right-wing radical, who celebrated Hitler's birthday. He haunted forests and woods, capturing and raping women after, and sometimes before, killing them. He often left pink lingerie atop victims' bodies, which he discarded in landfills. A cross-dresser since childhood, Schmidt transitioned from Wolfgang to live full-time in his feminine identity as Beate after raping and murdering several women and killing an infant. Wolfgang Schmidt, born in 1966, wanted to be a girl since the age of 3. He was 6 or 7 years old when he realized how very excited and cozy he felt putting on brass panties and petticoats belonging to his mother, whom he claims was cold-hearted. The thrill increased when he wet, soiled or threw up on himself while wearing the clothing. The boy's father discovered the dirty clothes hidden in the garden and barn, and his parents shamed him. Outside, in hiding, the boy continued masturbating in his mother's clothing. By age 8, the behavior was transforming into an addictive fetish. If anyone approached his hiding place as he pleasured himself, he would conceal the stolen undergarments. His mother found him naked from the waist down and soiled, and told her friends the boy was a pig, who still messed himself. As he aged, Schmidt incorporated magazines he found in the trash that depicted women nude or engaged in porn. He graduated to using candles and wearing swimsuits and corsets during the sessions, and then to such full-time thrills as wearing women's sweaters and panties under his pants. By age 23, the cross-dressing, vomiting, soiling, wetting and porn were not enough. Schmidt had urges to add a female person who performs these actions with me and would get sexual. He combed through junkyards on October 24, 1989, trying to find a doll. Failing that, he went in search of a woman that evening. Schmidt broke into the home where Edeltraut Nixdorf aged 51, lived with her husband, and stole a bikini, panties and candles before he found her planting tulips in the garden. Calling the assailant, "pig," "bastard," Nixdorf fought him with a rake. Schmidt bludgeoned her, fracturing her skull and causing a tear to the brain, before choking her to death. Her husband, the prime suspect, committed suicide months later. 7 months passed before Schmidt struck again. On May 24, 1990, he raped 45-year-old Krista Norjoks and strangled her with a cord. He would later testify that he had gone to the drunken woman's aid. But couldn't stop myself. He left his pink panties with her body in the landfill. On March 13, 1991, he encountered Inga Borkheide, aged 34, in the forest as she walked from a friend's home. He delivered a kick to her face before raping her and stabbing her to death. Her corpse was discovered with feces on its face. The crime frequency increased as the compulsions grew. On March 22, Schmidt came upon 44-year-old Tamara Petrovskaja in the woods pushing her 3-month-old son, Stanislaw, in a stroller. Schmidt snatched the infant and smashed him to death against a tree. He gagged the woman with pink panties and strangled her to death with a pink bra. On April 5, Schmidt saw 2 12-year-old girls in a wooded area near a village church, and attempted to grab one. The girls fought him off and escaped, receiving stab wounds in the process. The girls were able to provide a description of the assailant to the police, who drew a composite sketch. A reward of 20,000 German marks was offered. As a result, the police received over 1,000 tips. The parents of Schmidt's fiancée also reported and pointed out that Schmidt had a considerable resemblance to the identikit. However, the reference was not followed up. That same evening, Schmidt killed Talita Bremer, a 66-year-old pensioner who was asleep in her home. He raped the corpse. On August 1 of that year, Schmidt was on the hunt for a woman when 2 male joggers came across him masturbating, wearing a bra under a jacket. Noticing he matched the police sketch, they detained him and brought him to police. Schmidt told the court that murder was never his intention. "I just had to have the woman under my control. I wanted to force her to rest so as not to lose what I already had in principle. I never thought that I could kill her fatally. I just wanted living women." He had thought each woman was only in his head, a figment of his imagination, until he saw the deaths reported in the newspaper. He said, in 1992, the Pink Giant was sentenced to 15 years in prison and detention in a psychiatric hospital, the Brandenburg Havel Correctional Facility. Casela Friedrichsen and Gerhard Moors, 2 prominent court reporters at the time, reported extensively on the case. Friedrichsen shortly before and Moors shortly after the conviction. Friedrichsen wrote in early November 1992 that Schmidt had opened up to expert witnesses in a way no defendant who was accused of such terrible crimes had ever done. Perpetrators like Schmidt are marginalized as threatening, callous, brutal beasts, as monsters outside of human society. Their fantasies are given free rein in public. She quoted a sexologist specializing in sex offenders. The stories and atrocities of the great mass and pleasure murderers are so well received that they are reliable evergreens for the tabloid press in times of doldrums. Such reports seem to fill a gap and a need. Their socio-psychological function becomes visible in the elementary, primitive and unrestrained reactions of a broad population to acts of sexual violence. Archaic feelings of revenge and retaliation appear. Such reactions obviously bear a sadistic character. According to Friedrichsen, the desire to murder went back to Schmidt's childhood. As Friedrichsen explained, over the years Schmidt increasingly expanded his fetishes. Not everything remained hidden from his mother, so that he was subjected to increasingly harsh punishments. All in all, the picture that Friedrichsen gained from Schmidt revealed an essentially average biography next to a hopelessly disturbed inner world. Unlike Casella Friedrichsen, who pointed out Schmidt's background prior to the conviction, Moores dealt extensively with the assessment of Schmidt following the conviction of November 30, 1992, which was commissioned to answer the question of criminal responsibility. Moores opened with a reference to scorched earth journalism, which had already been mentioned in the Süddeutsche Zeitung at the beginning of the year in connection with the Schmidt case. According to Moores, this case was a dark chapter in the history of journalism. When Schmidt was arrested, his fiancée was pregnant and faced public calls to have an abortion. The defense had faced a media public execution. Schmidt had inflicted suffering on the relatives, which they would bear until the end of their lives. But it was misleading to portray Schmidt as a product of hell. Such actions are ones that people are capable of under unfortunate circumstances. The attempt to understand does not serve the purpose of exculpation, but of insight, albeit small, but possible, which could help to prevent such circumstances from arising in the first place or, at least to recognize them before they have such terrible consequences as in this one case. In terms of Schmidt's development, Moores recalled the description given by his colleague Friedrichsen, which he briefly summarized. The forensic psychiatrist Wilfried Rasch, at the time director of the Institute for Forensic Psychiatry in Berlin and shortly before retirement, assessed Schmidt. He diagnosed a sexual pathological development in which, as Moores quoted, fetish, coprophilic, transvestite and sadistic elements were found according to the legal formulas of Section 20 of the German Penal Code, a so-called other serious mental abnormality. However, Rasch recommended that the court not assume incapacity according to Section 20 of the Code, but only of reduced criminal responsibility according to Section 21 of the Code and to place him in a psychiatric hospital according to Section 63 of the Code. In his report, according to Schmidt's defense attorney, Rasch drew comparisons with serial killer Jürgen Bartsch, who was arrested in 1966 and had also been examined by him. But unlike Bartsch, he spoke of Schmidt having a real perversion that turned into an addiction that Schmidt could no longer control. The trial brought new insights into the beginnings of such catastrophic developments, Moores wrote, expressing his hope that science would hopefully process them. There were signs that were overlooked out of irreproachable ignorance and perceived as childish naughtiness. In conclusion, Moores praised the presiding judge, Hans Walter Ehrenstein, for conducting this oppressive, and at times, almost crippling, trial, fairly and in a very decent manner. In addition to numerous television documentaries, Schmidt's serial murders were also the subject of a play. Heiner Müller commissioned Anna Langhoff to write the play Schmidt Deutschland, der Rosa Ries for the Berliner Ensemble. The case served as a suggestion for Rosa von Praunheim for a theater workshop with young people in Brandenburg and der Havel. This resulted in his film The Pink Giant from 2008 with Charlie Hubner in the title role. There is also an episode of The World's Most Evil Killers on the case. While in custody, Schmidt revealed that he has, since childhood, perceived himself as female. In 2001, the court granted his petition to be addressed as a woman and change his name to Beate. Beate Schmidt is able to crossdress in lockup. In 2009, Schmidt was permitted to begin hormone treatment in order to change his appearance to the more feminine look he craved. Due to the prohibitive cost of gender-affirming surgery, he has not been able to undergo the procedures requested. A fellow patient claimed to have been raped in the shower by Schmidt on several occasions. That patient is a male. Former police officer who was named Jens and now identifies as a woman named Jasmine. Jasmine had been placed in the psychiatric hospital after raping a woman. His rape accusations against Schmidt were investigated, but no charges have been brought due to lack of evidence. Jasmine attempted suicide in 2010 by swallowing blades. The psychiatric hospital has by now relaxed restrictions on Schmidt, who admitted he is unpredictable, cannot control himself, and that it is best he remain in the psychiatric institution for the rest of his life of incarceration. Schmidt says, "The others are nasty to me. They say I could get a fat ass. That hurts. Then I have to cry. I cry a lot now. But it helps me. I feel more feminine inside." One final comment. I in no way think that Schmidt's gender identity issues were the trigger for the murders. Schmidt just happens to be a serial killer with gender identity issues. Big difference.